Greetings, friends. I wanted to give my thoughts on the recent truck convoy protest in Ottawa, Canada. Well, it started from the west and it drove there, but the big event culminating there with many, many thousands of people, many of whom have remained there for a number of days now, since Saturday when there were a very large concentration of people there. I was reading in the CBC Ottawa's, which I rarely would read anything, but for this I did look at some mainstream media. I almost never do. But Ottawa's Mayor Jim Watson, he's not been happy about these protests. Understandably, the city's clogged. And speaking of the residents nearby, Parliament Hill, where the protest is gathered, speaking of those residents who are affected, the mayor says, quote, quite frankly, these residents feel that they're prisoners in their own home, end quote. And then he went on to talk about roads being blocked and emergency vehicles can't get in. I don't know how much of that's true. Like, are the residents actually trapped there physically? I mean, maybe it's difficult for their automobile to get in, and maybe, but are they scared of being harassed by protesters? Because some of them might tell them, "Hey, take off your mask." I mean, that's probably what I would imagine is maybe, but who knows? I just thought that's funny because he's saying. They feel that they're prisoners in their own home. Well, what was this originally all, like a large portion of this, when this all started? Because it's all part of the same menu of restrictions, was home isolation, self-isolation at home. That was what they basically commanded us to do and enforced in some ways. And so we were already prisoners in our home, or those of us who went along with it. We haven't made you. If now there's a protest nearby, which understandably might be noisy and difficult to live next to, but a prisoner in your own home, I think that's this. You were already making your own self a prisoner to even think that, and then. I heard it might have been Jason Kenney or some politician. I saw something that because there's been other roadblocks going on, not just in Ottawa. There have been some like the U.S.-Canada border was blocked with some other truckers for the similar reason. And this politician was saying that these roads need to be cleared because we need to get the economy up and running again. And it's like, yeah. Have you cared about the economy, shutting it down all the time with all this medical tyranny? And now, when there's a protest, which does affect the economy in a specific and calculated way, now you're all for the economy opening up. I mean, come on, you politicians closed the U.S.-Canada border for who knows how long. Was it? I don't even know. Is it still kind of difficult? It was closed for over a year. Or maybe 2 years. Now there's a roadblock at the U.S.-Canada border and it's a problem. The irony is lost on these people. The irony is lost. Now, I did not attend this event. It's a sort of event that before I started working, I very well may have gone to Ottawa because I've gone there to attend protests on numerous occasions before. But over the last half year since the fall, since I started working and being more tired, especially on the weekend when I don't have to work, and also maybe in some ways finally running out of steam because I would attend Queen's Park almost basically every Saturday for over a year and a half from the beginning of almost the very beginning when I attended on May 2nd, 2020. So those anti-lockdown protests were associated with the same sentiment, which is manifested here in Ottawa. But the truck convoy thing, it's not the majority of truckers, but it is people. It doesn't matter. It's people bringing their vehicles and making a show of force, which is a good thing. It's good to make a show of force. We can't pat ourselves on the back and think that this is going to make a huge change, but it does demoralize the enemy to an extent. I would have attended maybe, but on the other hand, knowing how cold Ottawa is, I may not honestly have gone because, for one thing, you have to find a place to stay and And if you don't have a credit card, then that's difficult. But Ottawa is cold. I mean, I don't know all of Canada that well, but Toronto's been really cold. We've had a brutally cold January. It's been sub-zero temperatures without going up. Normally in the winter it does that. It goes down and it goes up. But this past January it just stayed down, like minus 15 Celsius, minus 18, at least minus 6, and it's just hanging around there. So I can't, like, that's Toronto, which is a much more pleasant than Ottawa, which is on the realm of like Montreal or something like that. So I can't imagine. I don't know what the temperatures were there, but I remember being in Ottawa on August 29th, and it was a rainy, windy day, and I wore multiple layers, jackets, like sweaters. This was August 29th, and I remember being like so soaked and frozen to the bone. Not frozen, but just thoroughly cold to the bone, completely drained. August 29th. Then, and I can't imagine. So this is in the dead of the Canadian winter, and that's fitting. That because all these numbers you got in the dead of the Canadian winter, with the cold could kill you. Like if you're not careful, this sort of cold can knock you out, and you can go unconscious and freeze to death. It happens to homeless people, but partially because they're underdressed. But imagine if this sort of event happened in the summertime. You could have gotten even bigger numbers. But of course, it had to happen now because this is a pressing issue. People are losing their jobs. It had to happen now. But it is fitting from a Canadian perspective that it happened in January, like the dead of the Canadian winter. And ponder this question: do you see the multicultural pastiche? Like, what kind of demographic is more likely to tough the cold? I'll leave that question for you to ponder. Like, are we going to see particular ethnic groups who don't mind extended standing or walking in, or you have your truck too, which is nice, but you can, generally if it's a march or there's people gathering around, extended being out in the cutting wind and the biting freeze. Are we going to see all the various ethnic peoples of Canada, those that have been here a long time and those that have immigrated here? Are we going to see all of that coming out to brave the cold? I'll just leave that question for you to ponder. I'm not convinced, like some people were telling me there were several 100,000 people there on Saturday. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but I just haven't seen evidence of that yet. But it doesn't matter, because regardless of how many, it was a big turnout, perhaps the hugest in a long time, maybe since the G20 protests over 10 years ago or something like that. And the fact that many of the protesters remain in Ottawa after a number of days underscores that this is now an escalation in the resistance. But I'm not saying that as if, now something has begun which is going to continue. I'm sure it'll melt away, but a sign has been made, and awareness has been established. And that could mean both things, good for our side and also bad, like now the state fears, and well, not fears, but they're more alerted, and they do possibly what happened in the US after January 6th, the Capitol riot in Washington, with forming new agencies and new ways to track and censor and prosecute us, anyone who questions these sorts of things or takes a stand or even making these kinds of protests illegal. And that may happen, but I also think the question is sort of pointless and silly. It's like, yeah, that might happen, but what are you saying? So now we don't protest anymore? I mean, there is something to be said for like focusing on your own family, your own community, getting back in touch with God, but I don't think, on the other hand, you just totally reject the idea of protesting. Protesting, as some people say, is often useless. And I've seen that too, after a certain point, yeah, it does. But that doesn't mean that all protests are that way. And there has to be some shows of force. So there's some symbolic richness for a narrative here of what happened, what we can tell ourselves later about what happened. Like Justin Trudeau, our effeminate and cowardly prime minister, could not face the protesters. He fled to an undisclosed location. Some people even say he fled to the United States. Why? Why did they really think that someone was gonna like break in where he was and try to kidnap him or something? This is crazy. And I've the suggestions that the Russians could be involved with it. Well, okay. I guess the other day I was talking about how I go to a Russian Orthodox church. So, oops. I guess that would mean that the Russians are paying me to protest against the establishment. Maybe that would be the move of logic there. And as some people have said, like Devin Stack of Blackpilled, watching this event from his pillbox in Arizona, in the desert, or wherever that guy lives, many people are going to take their selfies and have a good time, and then they're going to go home. And that's understandable, and that's fine, and that'll be that. At the same time, what we lack on the right is the understanding that wanting to be left alone from the government is not enough. We need to have the sentiment of wanting to be in power and to rule this country, because that's how our opponent operates. They operate to rule, and we are only letting them continue to abuse us. Why would you allow people who are constantly trying to abuse you and actually want you to not exist anymore? Why would you want them even in power at all? Let alone like, this has gone too far that you need this certain passport to be a trucker crossing the border and not. Let alone like this, we have a ruling class which is deeply psychopathic and evil and wants to genocide us. I mean specifically white people, but patriotic Canadians more generally, Christians, these groups of people, they basically want us not to exist anymore. So it's utterly imperative that if you want your people and your culture to survive, you have to also want power, and that means you have to be a bit smarter and more strategic. But so there are going to be benefits and drawbacks to what happened, but overall I think it's a good thing. Just don't get too carried away with it. Hasta luego, amigos.